The police constable who attended the scene believed the death was suspicious and noted there was bruising and blood on the torso. After questioning Port, Barking and Dagenham officers accepted his claim that he had found the body outside his front door when he returned from a night shift.
I had this book made to put some special photos in of Anthony. These pictures do reflect his personality. He was always the life and soul of the party. He was always one that wanted to make people laugh. Let me smile, because these are my favourite pictures of all. He really did have a zest for life. He just threw himself into everything he did. I've no doubt he would have succeeded in what he did, because he had such passion and such drive to do it. But that's been taken away from him. When I first received the news about Anthony, I was on holiday in Turkey at the time, but my phone was turned off. So I turned my phone back on the Sunday evening and received hundreds of missed calls, text messages. So I rang Paul, my other son, who then told me that Anthony had been found dead in the street. I just literally went into shock there and then. I don't even remember the flight home or anything about it. It was awful. And I rang Barking and Dagenham police, and the first initial contact was Anthony had been found dead in the street. So I said, well, was he shot? Was he stabbed? You know, had he been beaten up? We don't know. And at that moment, they weren't treating it as suspicious. So I said, well, it is suspicious. I said, you found him dead in the street. He hasn't been beaten up, he hasn't been stabbed, he hasn't been shot, anything. Something's not right. Where's his phone? Why don't you track his phone? No, it's too expensive. They refused to ever investigate it from the very beginning. Right. It's what's left of Anthony's property. His whole life. I've been waiting 2.5 years for all this stuff to come back. Police took it from his room after he died and put it into storage. Because they've been stored so long, all the clothes are mouldy. So I'm trying to salvage what I can. This is the saddest thing, being broken. Anthony loved it. It's quite sad looking at that. Not a lot for somebody's life, is it? This is a lot of his designs, his bits of fabric that he was working with. Anthony was studying fashion and design at Middlesex University. All he ever wanted to do was be a famous fashion designer, for everybody to know his name. That's all he ever wanted. He wanted to be a... I keep saying me now. He did get fame, but for all the wrong reasons.
A week after Anthony's death, police received dramatic new evidence. One of his friends revealed that Anthony had hooked up with Stephen Port via a male escort website called Sleepy Boy, a couple of days before his body was found. Port was then arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice for lying to police about not knowing Anthony. After changing his story, Port admitted he had hired Anthony as an escort for the night, but insisted Anthony had died from a self-inflicted drugs overdose.
Stephen Port was saying that when Anthony got there, he had taken GHB. And then an hour or two later, he'd gone back into the bathroom and taken more GHB, at which time he was violently ill. Stephen Port then said that Anthony had gone to sleep and he went to work and left him for 8 hours while he went and did his shift. So then Port said he came back from work and found Anthony dead, so he panicked and carried him outside. So I'd said to the liaison officer, why would you leave a total stranger that you'd never met before in your flat, in bed? I said, you just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. Well, he did.
After Port was arrested for lying to police, they took samples of his DNA. He was released on bail and later discounted as a murder suspect.
Every single time I tried ringing the police, I kept saying to them, have you found anything else out? Have you done any more investigation? Have you looked at Anthony's computer? Because they had Anthony's computer, they took Port's computer at the same time and wouldn't look at either of them. Why would we do that? It's too expensive. It was a total and utter open and shut case to them.
If police had looked through Port's computer, they would have found vital evidence. Immediately before he accessed Anthony's escort profile on Sleepy Boy, Port did several disturbing online searches. These included date rape drug, unconscious boys rape videos, boys being drug raped, unconscious porn videos. In the early hours of the next day, Port messaged Anthony to arrange a meet-up. Hiya, are you free to come to Barking Tuesday night for an overnight? Please send some pics.
It makes me feel absolutely furious that they would never entertain the idea that Stephen Potts had anything to do with his death. If maybe they'd listened to me in the first place and investigated it at any investigation whatsoever, 3 more young boys would still be alive.
Stephen Port was born in 1975 in Southend. Then his family moved to Dagenham in East London. Bullied at school, he was a loner who went on to become a chef. In 2005, Ryan Edwards got to know Stephen Port as a neighbour.
So I used to live there where the blue chairs are on the first floor, so diagonally opposite to Stephen's flat here. So I had a good view actually there of wherever he was out with normally young men on the ground floor. Stephen's appetite for men was extremely high. It was almost like an insatiable thirst because it was literally one after another, after another, after another.
Port was regularly meeting young men through gay dating and escort sites. He had multiple profiles and used a variety of fake names.
Stephen's type was, in gay terms, a twink, which is, you know, a young, slim gay guy. Sometimes effeminate. The chaps that Stephen would date would be sort of 16, 17, 18, and almost a bit vulnerable types. Stephen did have a peculiar childlike personality. There was one time when it was coming up to one of my parties and I found an old, disused toy truck. I gave him the toy truck as a present, and so it was a bizarre sight. There was a party happening. Stephen was sat on the floor cross-legged and pushing the toy truck up and down the floor, again, like a world of his own, just like a child would play with a toy. It was very, very bizarre to see.
Ryan detected a darker side to his neighbour when he dropped into Port's flat one afternoon for coffee, a little unexpectedly.
Stephen took ages to get to the door, and he sort of shuffled up and opened the door, and he looked absolutely dreadful. Like he hadn't slept a wink, his eyes were red raw, and he was almost slurring his speech. As I sat down, I was completely shocked because on the coffee table was a massive clear plastic container that actually filled the whole circumference of the coffee table. And it was full of vials of clear liquid and sachets of white powder. I was completely taken aback. There were dozens and dozens of clear bags of white powder and again dozens of these vials of clear liquid. It really disturbed me because it was obviously a huge amount of drugs, far beyond personal use for someone. So, you know, what on earth was he doing with them?
When Ryan met some of Port's boyfriends, they revealed a violent and abusive character.
On this one occasion, I asked why, what happened, and he said Stephen had pushed me into a TV and I'd cut my head. There was another time where one of the boyfriends said that Stephen had actually been violent to him. I did see a trend towards the later years. The issues the boyfriends were describing to me seemed more sinister.
In the summer of 2014, just 2 months after killing his first victim, Port struck again. "22-year-old Slovakian Gabriel Kovari moved to London in June and began looking online for a room to rent.
I met Gabriel online. He had a profile on a kind of gay social networking stroke dating site. And because I had this spare room, I agreed to meet him. He was Slovakian. He was very smart, but very sweet-natured.
After 6 weeks in John's spare room, Gabriel announced he was leaving.
I didn't kind of pry into what he was doing and who he was going to meet. I know he went and met one guy via, a dating app. I regret not having asked more questions about where he was going, who he was going to stay with.
The guy Gabriel was moving in with was Stephen Port, who soon introduced his new flatmate to his neighbour.
It was a normal text from Stephen, come over and see my Slovakian twink flatmate. So I went round there and met Gabriel. Stephen wasn't there, and he struck me as a really nice, articulate chap. So after that first meeting, we kept in touch.
When Ryan texted Port to say how nice he thought Gabriel was, Port replied saying he was taking good care of him, he. Within days, Ryan noticed Gabriel's sudden disappearance.
Suddenly, the communication stopped. And I thought that was odd. And so I picked it up with Stephen, actually, via text message, "Oh, have you heard from Gabriel?" Stephen was then texting me various things, saying that, he wasn't sure where Gabriel was, that he thinks he's left to stay with an army guy. And then I got a bolt out of the blue, a text from Stephen, a long text, saying, "I've got some really sad news, neighbour, but Gabriel has gone back home and he's picked up a mysterious illness and he's died. And whatever you do, please don't mention this on Facebook to the friends and family, because obviously they're upset enough as it is."
Port had killed Gabriel with a fatal dose of chemsex drug, GHB, then somehow moved his body, without being spotted, a few hundred metres away to a nearby church graveyard.
I like coming here. It's such a quiet area, this churchyard. I've walked the dogs through the gate, and as I've come through here, I've looked up and I could see what I thought was someone asleep, leaning up against the wall. He was wearing dark glasses, but they weren't on his face properly. I went up to him and touched a bit of bare skin. Skin I felt was cold. He was almost semi-clothed in the sense his clothes were up here, up toward his chest area. It did look highly suspicious. He couldn't have clothed himself in that way. He must have been placed there. I just thought the whole scenario didn't look right.
The police suspected that Gabriel had died from a self-inflicted drugs overdose, and the death was not treated as suspicious. They tracked down Gabriel's recent address.
Less than a week after he'd left, I was working from home and 4 police turn up at my door. And they tell me that he's been found dead in a cemetery. And after that, it's a bit of a blur. So you're not just dealing with the fact that your friend has died, it's the horrific circumstances and this mystery And I guess that was why I felt compelled, even at that early stage, to understand and know what happened.
Many questions remained unanswered about his friend's death, so John decided to do a little investigating of his own.
I typed in unexplained deaths barking, and this link came up, which is about 2.5 to 3 months before Gabriel was found. Man dies in unexplained circumstances in Barking. Police are appealing for information after a man died in unexplained circumstances on Cook Street. So then, what I did was I typed Cook Street into Google Maps. So there's Cook Street and there is St. Margaret's Churchyard. It's like a stone's throw, a couple of blocks away. That's too close. They're too similar. Young men found dead in the same circumstances, that close, mere streets away. It made me suspicious. It seemed suspicious.
Barking and Dagenham police did not link the deaths of the two gay young men. No public warnings were issued to Barking's gay community.
At the time of Gabriel's death, I didn't hear anything about it in the local community. So the information I had on my phone, the crucial evidence, stayed on my phone. Had the police even made any kind of outreach to the LGBT community, then local people like myself would have been aware and we could have gone straight to the police with the information we knew. And people's lives could have been saved.
Just a week after murdering his second victim, Port used one of his profiles on the gay dating site FitLads to contact 21-year-old Daniel Whitworth. On the 3rd of September 2014, Port suggested they meet for a drink before dinner at his flat. Just so you can get to know me a bit, so you know I'm not some psycho.
It was about 3 weeks later. I've come in through this gate and I've seen what looked like another young man lying in exactly the same spot virtually. And I thought, no, I don't believe this. I thought, please, God, don't let this be another body. I thought, I don't believe it, it can't be. This body was placed in exactly the same position as the previous one. Again, I was thinking, what made him sort of want to sit in the same, L-shape position? This was very suspicious to my way of thinking. Well, anybody would have thought it was suspicious. Barking and Dagenham police, I don't really think they know what they're doing, quite honestly. They're nothing better than Keystone cops.
After drugging, raping and murdering Daniel Whitworth, Port had planted a fake suicide note on his body. It suggested that Daniel had been in a relationship with Gabriel Kavari, the previous young man to die, and that they had been using GHB when Gabriel accidentally overdosed and died. Now Daniel was taking his own life out of remorse.
We were just going about our usual routine, and there was a knock at the door, and there were 2 policemen who immediately removed their hats and held their hats in front of them. And I thought, oh my God. They said they were sorry to inform us that somebody who matched Daniel's description was found in Barking, and they were very sorry, but it looked like he'd taken his own life. And I turned away. I turned my face from them and I could feel the tears, and I gave way to them. They said they'd found a suicide note and he was just found peacefully underneath a tree. We were led to believe it was a drug overdose. We were extremely confused because Daniel was quite a happy lad. Everything was going his way. It just didn't seem to make any sense. I've used this box since the death of Daniel, basically to keep everything in, photographs and things. He did have his whole life ahead of him. Adam raised Daniel by himself. He was his only child, yeah. He was the apple of his eye. I mean, I'm Daniel's stepmother and I love him dearly, but I can't begin to imagine. Sorry. There are no words.
The pathologist who examined Daniel's body noted there was bruising below both of Daniel's arms, which may have resulted from manual handling of the deceased, most likely prior to death. Police did not treat the death as suspicious and focused on Daniel's apparent suicide note. Mandy says the police asked them to verify it was Daniel's handwriting.
Police sent us the bottom half, not even the bottom half, but the goodbye part of the suicide note via email. And we couldn't be sure because we hadn't seen his handwriting on a regular basis. We used modern technology to communicate. This is one of the last birthday cards I got from the boys, which is in Daniel's handwriting. This was really all we had to compare the note to. We did say that we couldn't be sure, and they did say that they had experts in the field to look at this handwriting so that it could be analysed. And that's exactly what we thought was happening.
Later, Mandy and Daniel's father, Adam, saw the whole suicide note.
It was so cold and to the point and matter of fact, and Adam voiced this immediately, almost immediately, said, "There is nothing here that tells me this is Daniel. Absolutely nothing." It also said, don't blame the guy I was with last night. And so one of our first questions was, who is this man that he's mentioning? Who was he with last night? And he said, we don't know. We may never know. We won't know the answer to everything. In retrospect, I don't believe they were looking for the answers. If they were looking, they wouldn't have had to have looked very far. The links were there. The links were there.
Gabriel's friend, John Pape, grew even more suspicious when he heard about the third death of a young man in the area.
It may have been mild paranoia, but at the time I was thinking, you've got now 3 young men turning up dead in the same area in Barking. There's something very wrong going on here. And because I knew Gabriel, I started to worry that I might be in danger. And so I called the detective from Barking and Dagenham, and I said, if this is murder, you have to tell me, because I'm concerned for my own safety. I suppose my thoughts ran to, are these young men being murdered? And I was assured that it wasn't murder.
During this period, Port tried to bolster his cover story. Using a false Facebook profile, he posed as John Luck, a 21-year-old former gay porn star from California, now living in Dagenham. He claimed to have known Gabriel and began spreading stories about Gabriel and Daniel's involvement in dangerous chemsex orgies.
This person is saying that Gabriel and Daniel were together at a party in Barking, essentially a drug-fueled orgy. So he says, young guys, loads of drugs provided by older guys. They take advantage of the young ones when they are passed out. One collapsed, and when he woke up, one was fucking him. They say these parties last 3 days non-stop. They give them shots with dope inside and coke. Obviously, the first port of call is to go to the detectives at Barking and Dagenham. And immediately I ran into that brick wall. You're not next of kin. There's nothing we can tell you. But the point is, I was trying to engage with them because I felt that maybe I had information about Gabriel's final movements. And they said that they would speak with their superior officer and get back to me, and they never did.
John Pape then contacted gay online news site Pink News and Gallup, an LGBT support group with close links to the police. Both organisations approached Barking and Dagenham police to highlight John's concerns.
Gallup called the police and they said, we've got a guy and he thinks he's got relevant information. He thinks that possibly Gabriel and Daniel were at the same chemsex party. Do you want to speak to him? And the police said no, and also that these deaths are not suspicious.
On the 23rd of June 2015, Daniel Whitworth's parents were summoned to the inquest into his death. They were confused to learn that the police had recorded that they, the Whitworths, had identified the handwriting on the suicide note as Daniel's. More surprises were to follow.
The coroner asked the detective whether this handwriting had been properly analysed, and he responded that, you know, they'd taken it back to the police station and had a look. But it was such a shock because they said that they were going to get this handwriting expertly analysed by a handwriting specialist, and they didn't do it. They quite simply didn't do it, and if they had, they would have known pretty early on that that was not Daniel's handwriting. And they were then looking at murder. And then before you know it, they're asking the detective in charge about a blue bedsheet that Daniel was found on that we knew nothing about. The coroner did ask the inspector in charge, had they done any DNA testing on the bedsheet, to which he replied that he hadn't. And when he was asked why they hadn't done any DNA testing on the bedsheet, he said they didn't feel the need to scrutinise this bedsheet because he didn't think there was anybody else involved at that time.
The DNA on the bedsheet would most likely have matched with Stephen Port's DNA, which was already on the police database.
And then we hear that he was bruised under the arms. The coroner said that there was bruising found under Daniel's arms and across his chest, which suggested he had been manhandled. And so there we had it. We had our third party involvement. There was no way this was a suicide. He was taken there. He was taken there.
The coroner recorded an open verdict, concluding that third-party involvement could not be ruled out.
At the end, we came out, or I specifically said to the liaison, you know, we've been given an open verdict. Can we now reopen this? Can we carry on with investigations? Because there's a lot that we've heard in there today. And they actually said, no, that's it. It's an open verdict. And that doesn't mean that we can carry on with it. That is the conclusion of Daniel's death. That's your lot. Live with it, was the attitude. I just think that we were hurried along to get a line drawn under this. And it's left another family besides ours, and Gabriel's family, and Anthony's family, in this awful, awful position. That's a huge mistake.
In early 2015, Stephen Port was convicted of perverting the course of justice during the investigation into Anthony Walgate's death. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison, but was released 2 months early on licence. On the 13th of September, on gay dating app Grindr, he exchanged messages with 25-year-old Jack Taylor.
Jack was lovely, he was a beautiful person. He was funny, very considerate. He was like a big brother to me and Jen, even though he was our younger brother. He looked out for us. I just remember his smile, his laugh, and just the way he was in general. Happy, caring. There will always be a hole, now that he's gone. Always. Jack went out on the Saturday evening to visit friends. Had a few drinks with people that he would normally have had a drink with. He didn't come home Sunday night. We then started to think there was something a little bit odd. And then come Monday, and as I come out of college, Mum had rung me. And then, whilst I'm on the phone to her, the police had pulled up outside. And they came in and asked Mum and Dad if they was Jack's mum and dad. So they've obviously said yes, and they said, your son's dead. It was as simple as that. Jack's dead. And obviously I heard the scream from Mum, and I just slid down my fridge onto my floor and just sat there crying. It was like he was living in a nightmare at that point, waiting for somebody to say it wasn't true.
Police told the family Jack was found in a park next to a churchyard in Barking, having died of a drugs overdose.
They'd said that there was a syringe found in Jack's pocket and a powder in his wallet. They said that the coroner had also found a needle mark in Jack's arm. Well, straight away, our immediate thoughts were Jack wouldn't have done drugs. He was anti-drugs, so something wasn't right.
Nearly 2 weeks after Jack's death, his sisters say they contacted Barking and Dagenham police for an update on their investigation.
Me and my sister were just blown away to find out that nothing had been done for 11 days. No investigation. It was just a case of Jack had just gone and sat there, done an overdose, and that was that.
Unhappy with the police's investigation, Donna and Jen began their own detective work.
If I just put these ones here, these are about Jack and his needle mark and arm and...
Jack's last steps on Friday and Saturday night.
Me and my sister Jen, we sat up till 4, 5 every morning after Jack died. And what we'd do is we'd get pieces of paper and put things around the outside like a jigsaw puzzle to see what bit fitted with what. We did a lot of research on the internet, and we come across, obviously, the other boys that had been found in Barking.
This one is when we found Gabriel and Daniel online.
So that was the third boy that passed away. It did all look suspicious to us. The 3 young boys, all in their 20s, all found around the same area. They all had GHB. It really did seem suspicious to us. Me and my sisters questioned the police a few times about these other boys and Jack. And we'd said about, could there be a connection? They'd said no.
The Taylor sisters say they continued to raise questions with the police, and as a result, officers eventually agreed to show them where Jack's body was found.
We just walked out the train station, didn't we? And they were both waiting for us, the 2 police officers. And when we arrived, they told us that they had CCTV footage of Jack meeting a man.
We're really shocked because obviously this is 14 days after Jack's died, so we wasn't aware that there was any CCTV.
The man in the CCTV footage was Stephen Port. captured here on his way to meet Jack Taylor.
We was expecting